Hi, Bethany Reese here. I am the Director of Client Success here at TechHuman. Happy to be here today.
Thank you, Bethany. Javier?
Yes, I'm Javier Guerra. I am the Chief Strategy Officer and co-founder of TechHuman.
Thanks so much, guys, for making time join us on the Ivy podcast today. Before we dive in and start talking about, all of the great stuff you guys are building at TechHuman, I would love to spend a couple of minutes understanding your guys' backgrounds. So, Bethany, just give us a thumbnail version of your career today.
Sure. Originally from North Carolina, I have been in San Antonio since 2006, though, so definitely a Texan now. Prior to the IT industry, I was actually in hospitality for probably about 6 or 7 years. Enjoyed that, love it, but definitely wouldn't go back. I love the IT industry. Started my career in staffing and then kind of worked my way up, and now am the Director of Client Success here at TechHuman.
Super exciting. Thank you for sharing that. Javier, can you share a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so I actually went to school to be a doctor. I finished my pre-med studies and borderline OCD and perfectionism, and I dug in a lot to the medical industry and how the industry worked. And I decided, you know what, it's really not aligned with a lot of my belief systems and in holistic health and preventative medicine. So I decided not to go down that route, and I ended up getting into to technology and worked for a couple of multibillion-dollar firms. And there were some things that I wanted to change within the industry. And so that really led me to then put some good heads together of some different people and create something that was different to solve a lot of the problems that are plaguing the industry.
That's great. And thank you for sharing that. So to take that a little bit further in terms of the problem you guys are solving with TechHuman, Javier, can you share a little bit more about the mission of the company and what problems are you guys solving?
Yeah, well, everybody knows that technology is evolving at a rapid pace, right? And a lot of people, we get caught up in the technology, and we a lot of times forget about the human. But the human is much more powerful than the technology. But if you don't get the human right, and you don't get the team right, and you don't align the human, the human teams the way that they should be aligned, the technology is going to amplify the negative within the team. And so that's really a problem that we're solving. And as more and more people start to wake up, really what we're helping them to do is to treat the team as the organization's most valuable asset. And a lot of organizations, they have to look at their budgets, they have to look at their finances, they have data on their money, they have data on their revenues, on their EBITDA, all this stuff, but they're not really analyzing and understanding their teams as well. And so that's what we're bringing to them, is we're helping them to increase their TechTeamiQ. We're helping them to treat their team as their organization's most valuable asset, and then align with their business strategy, intelligently scale and optimize into the future, and continue to evolve as the landscape evolves.
Bethany, you've been now in technology and IT space for a few years now, and coming from a completely different sector. Share with us, what are the different trends and ideas that you have observed, especially in the last couple of years with the industry going through so many different iterations and cycles? Just talk to us a little bit about some of the trends that you're mostly excited about.
Yeah, of course. One of the reasons why I love being in the technology space is the constant innovation and change, right? No one ever knows everything because it's impossible, because it's always ever changing. A lot of the different components that I have really come to appreciate that have changed is definitely due to COVID, the remote working environment, right? Everyone had been wanting to work remote for so many years, pushing for it. It never happened. COVID kind of forced us to be able to do that and have the opportunity to do that. So that was a huge game changer, not only from a technical perspective, but also just a culture and human perspective. We had to have the technology in place to be able to support that. So thankfully, we have innovative tools out there that are able to support that in this day and age, and easily transition to that. AI is taking off. If you use it correctly, it can amplify the team's success, productivity, etc. AI is not here to replace anyone's jobs. It's to make our jobs more effective be able to automate some of the mundane and kind of repetitive tasks that we do, so that we as humans can do what we do but best, which is be more of a strategic mind, growth mindset, etc. So it's ever changing. I mean, that's the great thing about it. They say that 85% of the jobs that will exist in 2030 haven't even been invented yet. That's super exciting if you kind of just think about the innovation behind all of that and what that means.
To take that a little bit further, Javier, from a perspective of future of work, there was recently a study by Deloitte basically outlining the 3 critical pillars of the kind of the future of work, where employees or candidates, they go through the kind of from comfort to connection to contribution, and the sense of belonging was identified as one of the top reasons that's going to keep the employees at their current companies. What are your thoughts overall on future of work? How do you see, different trends shifting or impacting the way people collaborate, the way people communicate, and on the employer side, in terms of sourcing and onboarding and retaining the employees? Just share your thoughts overall on the future of work.
Yeah. So you mentioned comfort, connection, and what was the third one?
Contribution.
So comfort and connection, if you think about it, humans are complicated, but they're not that complicated, right? They want to be heard. They want to feel valuable. They want to make a contribution, right? They need that connection. You can look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but ultimately, Google did a study on Project Aristotle, and they're just saying their findings were that you need to create an environment of psychological safety. The problem is that with rapid change and evolution, especially in the technology space, budgets are getting more compressed, time is getting more compressed. And so what happens is when you start to be under the gun more and more, your stress levels go up, and you start to get into fight or flight mode. And it's very difficult to slow down and really make that human connection when you're in that mode of existence and work. And so really what it's really going to take is it's going to take for us to be able to slow down. What's exciting to me about the future of work is that, the leaders that are really in tune with the human element and really care about their team, they're going to be able to leverage automation to automate things, to do things smarter, right? Not harder, but also slow down and look at their culture from a granular level. Everybody talks about organizational culture, but very few organizations live that culture. They don't live the core values. If you go ask the employees what is their culture, they're not going to be able to answer it. But we need to take culture down to a granular level at the team level, because every team is different. And even if it's in technology, your app dev team is going to be different than your data science team, is going to be different than your help desk team, right? And so, what we found is that helping leaders take it down to a granular level and really understand it and remove the cognitive bias and use data to help them make better decisions and bring on better people, then to help them to understand what is driving their people. What do they care about? What are their value systems? What makes them feel like they're giving and making a contribution at work? That's going to keep them there long term, right? And because everybody's different, you have to treat them differently. But it's difficult because you don't have a lot of time. So what we're doing is we're helping create that time for them, and it's it's really about the people, but it's solving the time constraints that's the main issue.
Absolutely, and it's such a fascinating topic. We could probably spend the rest of the podcast talking about this particular area.
Sure.
But
yeah.
We've seen 2021 has been a very interesting year, to say the least, with so much unpredictability going on. But we can all agree that it has been an extremely competitive market when it comes to candidate availability and in talent acquisition, and the war on retention overall. And I've seen companies go, implement some very creative strategy when it comes to attracting the top talent to their teams, from nearshore opportunities to employing different technology solutions such as employer of record platforms and things like that, direct sourcing. But the overall contingent workforce perspective has been definitely also on the rise. Bethany, curious to get your take on just the overall strategies that you had seen companies succeed in the space of talent acquisition, attracting the top talent, because it's such a highly competitive market, especially in technology. What are your thoughts on that?
Definitely. Well, as most listeners on this podcast probably already know by now, but if you're not remote, either 100% or at least doing something hybrid, you are, you're losing in the talent war. Prior to COVID, candidates' expectations, they would prefer to work 100% remote, and those opportunities were very enticing. After COVID, they expect it. That's kind of the new norm of the talent retention is 100% remote, especially in IT. Now, there are some of those positions that, yes, of course, people still need to go into data centers, people still need to have hands-on, setting up computers, etc. But most of what we do in IT, we can do 100% remote, which we found out through COVID. And the employers out there that say, well, I don't know how that would work, or that would really change our culture, or I just don't know how I would manage my team in that type of an environment, you're going to definitely be behind the curve as far as attracting the best talent. You're going to start seeing the leftovers, the people who can't get those 100% remote jobs, because if they could, they would. Something else on retention, etc., is I recently did a poll on LinkedIn of, what's the main reasons why people change jobs? And the answers that I provided in the poll, the options were lack of work-life balance, compensation, manager relationships, or lack of career development. And a majority of the polls fed me back that it was manager relationships. So regarding, attracting those talents, we as leaders have to be somebody that somebody wants to come work for. We have to be a leader that they want to work for, stand behind, represent, etc. And so really we are a huge emphasis on driving that talent and attracting that talent.
You've touched upon the remote opportunities, and we've seen the companies probably pre-pandemic or even during the initial phase of the pandemic, thinking that, hiring virtually is definitely going to expose them to a lot greater talent pools on the global scale, but also the competition 10x, because the companies much bigger with much better packages, much better benefits, have also started targeting the same pool of candidates as well. So from the remote opportunities, one of the biggest challenges that I've seen, and I talk to a lot of executives and companies of various size, and one trend that I've observed from a remote perspective is building out a process for effective onboarding of the new hires. So from the, remote capabilities, Javier, curious to get your take on what have you seen in terms of companies succeeding in this space to onboard new employees successfully when everything is done remotely?
And I'll answer that to what I think is most important, right? And the onboarding is not just bringing on somebody from the get-go. You can consider the onboarding could be, first few months of them joining the team, right? And so, one of the ways that I believe that, that I know that people are going to be able to better retain their people is by really taking the time to figure out who those people are, right? On the onboarding process, we help our clients do this. We do this internally. We bring them on, you have a good candidate experience, you make them feel like you actually care about them, right? Of course, you should care about them, but you make it efficient for them, right? You make the experience efficient, you give them good communication back and forth. But during our onboarding process, we take the time to figure out what do these people want? What do they want in their career? What do they want in their life? And then we align that with what the company needs. So if we're giving our people what they want in their life and in their career and helping them grow, because a lot of these technologists, they want achievement, they want to grow, right? They want development. And so if we can align that with what our company needs, then theoretically everybody's happy. Why would anybody want to leave? Because they're growing where they want to grow. They're feeling appreciated because you're helping them to achieve what they want to achieve and leveraging the company mission to do so. The company's getting what they need. And so, theoretically, everybody's happy, right? It doesn't always work out that way, but some people will leave. But you're typically going to have an engaged employee that's going to, provide way more value than what you're paying them. And I think that's the key, is just making people feel appreciated, having good, open, transparent communication, building that trust, and taking the time to really understand them and onboard them and make them feel like they're a valuable contributor on the team.
So you've touched upon kind of the first phase where the employees are being onboarded, that initial experience.
Mm-hmm.
And as I spend also quite some time talking to a lot of the peers in the industry and those that those that do get onboarded, and that very first period where in a traditional world you'll get an opportunity to do some rotations, you'll get to meet a lot of people, even run into folks in hallways. But that gets taken away in a remote capacity where you are limited in terms of the opportunities to be able to build those relationships with folks, not only on your team, but probably even outside of that. Yeah. Bethany, what have you seen in some of the projects maybe that you have led when it comes to helping the candidates succeed during that initial period when it comes to networking internally within the organizations? How to go about actually build those meaningful relationships when you don't have that opportunity to go and knock on somebody's door and have a small talk?
Yeah, of course. I've seen companies do so many different innovative things in this area, because you're right. We don't have the water cooler talk anymore, quote unquote. We don't pass each other in the hallways, but we can still create that environment. So it could look like things of those typical business units that you would usually, walk the candidate, the new employee around to introduce them. Why can't you set up a Zoom invite or a Microsoft Teams invite and introduce them quickly to that business department or that stakeholder group that they'll be working closely with to have that introduction? We have tools at our fingertips that we can use to still try to capture the culture of introductions, introducing them to people, passing people in the hallway, etc. We just have to make sure we properly set them up and are utilizing them, and really kind of try to create the things that we used to have in orientation or onboarding, quote unquote. How can we do that virtually now? And there are companies out there doing it very successfully. It just takes, some strategic thought, some input. Definitely from an onboarding perspective, clear communication is more important than ever, down to the smallest of things, right? What meetings do you expect your employees to be on video for versus audio? What's acceptable? When do they need to be online? Do you care about them being online? How will you confirm what their work is, that their work is being done without having to micromanage them because you can't physically see them? Like I said, there are a lot of tools out there that can make these types of things happen. You can have introductions to people on their first days. You schedule it in their calendar, get on a video, hop on there, coffee breaks. I've seen companies run successfully, happy hours or new employee introductions where they just block out a certain amount of time and anyone in the company can meet the new employees. So there are definitely some very innovative ways to continue to have that culture or that new employee experience.
I love that framework. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say and we're doing a lot of this stuff internally, right? I mean, we incorporate this into our meetings of just, people are chiming in and saying, what happened in your week last week, and from your personal life, in your professional life, what was good, right? And coffee breaks, virtual coffee breaks, all this stuff. So it's important stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to add to that, what both of you guys alluded to is at the end of the day, it boils down to the organization creating that environment for the new hires, new employees to be very successful during that initial period when it comes to everything being virtual. So I think it's, it makes perfect sense, some of the examples that both of you guys have talked about. I want to spend a few minutes talking about the space that a lot of hiring managers think they're really good at, but unfortunately not a lot very successful in the space of interviewing. And from my observation, and I ask that question every guest that I have on the podcast, regardless if they do interviews or not, because for every executive, surrounding yourself with the top performers, the best people is the top of the mind, whether you're actively recruiting or not. So when it comes to interviewing, a lot of the interviews are based on that personal past experience, which is very flawed, and not so much focus on what is the strength that's missing on the team versus me focusing on kind of what are the weaknesses that I can tolerate in that particular candidate when the interview is actually happening. Javier, I'll start with you in the sense, what have you seen, or maybe some of the strategies that you share with both sides, the hiring manager and the candidate, when it comes to interviewing? What are some of the questions that you personally love to ask in your interviews? And more importantly, what do you look for in the responses when you hear them?
So, I think I'll start with talking about from the client side, right? And I'll talk about it from a strategic perspective. I mentioned earlier about, understanding, having a good understanding of your team and of the individual, right? So, the approach that we take, and we take this approach internally, and we help our clients do this as well, is literally we will measure the team. So we can have our clients' team in a data analytics platform to where we can actually see the gaps on the team. Not only do we understand their technical gaps, we understand their behavioral gaps, we understand their motivational gaps, right? And so depending on what issues or problems, the challenges the client is having, we can identify these things with data. We can also see them from an individual perspective, and then we can tailor questions to probe deeper into those areas. To give you an example, a client was having issues with repeat issues coming up. There was risk coming up on a team. They were producing different software tools, and they were handing them over to operations, but there wasn't proper documentation. They had consultants coming in and doing a lot of work, but they couldn't suggest improvements because they didn't have proper documentation. Well, when we took a look at their team, we were able to identify that they had very little innovation motivators, and they had very little order motivators, right? And so there was really nobody on the team that was challenging the status quo with innovation. There was really nobody on the team that really wanted to bring that order and structure. And so we were able to help them identify that, look, it may be beneficial for you to bring somebody on board that has these drivers, because they're going to come in here and make some change happen. And your issues will stop to become repeat. They will stop repeating, right? And so different things like that, but also a big one for us is solutions mindset, right? A growth solutions mindset. So asking people questions and seeing where their mindset is are they focused on the problem, or are they focused on solving the problem? And you can ask these questions during interviews, and very open-ended questions, and you just see where their mind goes. And that gives you a clue of what type of person they are. And most people want the growth solutions minded person. They don't want somebody coming in that's going to be focused on the problem and just think about the problem all the time. They want somebody that's going to see a problem and say, how can we solve that problem? And start poking around to then fix that problem so it doesn't keep coming up.
Approach and the thought process probably matters a lot more than the actual outcome to the particular problem that's being presented. So I love that framework. Bethany, can you share your thoughts on the interview aspects, whether from the candidate or from the hiring manager perspective?
Sure. One thing as hiring managers, I think we can have a tendency of doing that we need to make sure we're checking ourselves on is that we're not trying to hire us, right? A lot of times I think we identify and connect to people that are very similar to us, but you need a lot of diversity of thoughts, just diversity in general on your team to be able to be successful. So making sure we're constantly asking ourselves, well, why did we think that person was a good fit? What are we gauging it upon? Do we even know what we're looking for? that one sounds so basic, but it's surprising how many times I will talk to managers and I can tell they really don't know what they need or are looking for. They may have a problem and they know it needs to be solved, for instance, with a person or someone with a skill set, but they really don't truly know what kind of person they may need to be able to truly solve that. So I think it's really important for leaders to understand what exactly you are looking for, who can solve that problem or who can deliver that for you. Is it strong technical abilities? Is it personality? Is it a combination? And where are you willing to kind of bend on that? If you have a 100% checklist, what's your 80% that you can't live without, right? Really knowing that helps us, I think, identify and make a lot quicker decisions because we do know what we are looking for. Also, checking ourselves on that 80%. Is that 80% realistic, right? Do we know what the market's like? Are we educating ourselves and keeping ourselves up to date on interviewing trends, salaries, what the market's paying, what the talent's like? Or are we just going by maybe our internal employees that we've had for 5 to 10 years? That's not the market today, right? When they joined the team. So I think it's really important for us to be networking. I think you mentioned it a little bit, John, networking with others, knowing what the industry is like, and really educating ourselves on the process so that we can make it effective. Sometimes, it blows my mind how some managers can literally make it an offer after a 30-minute phone interview, whereas other managers need 6 and 7 interviews. What's the disconnect there? What are we missing there? I'm not saying one is right or wrong, but is there a medium there? Do we know what we're doing? Is 7 interviews really needed? Is a whole panel really needed anymore? Those types of things. So really just making sure we're asking ourselves why a lot of times will, I think, get us a long ways.
Wait a minute. We're not actually working with a client that won 7 interviews, right?
No, we're
maybe
not.
maybe 4 interviews, maybe 4.
Yeah. Yes.
Maybe.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that happens. It's in this day and age, in this environment, anything goes. But I love some of these examples that you were making, Bethany, from a perspective of really creating that two-way street almost during the interview process, where the candidate also gets an opportunity to make their own assessment, ask their questions, and understand, is this the type of leader that I can succeed under, or is this the right environment for me that's matching my personality and my career ambitions? So I think all of that ties together, and those are exceptional frameworks. Thank you for sharing that. Javier, you've been in the industry for quite some time in terms of, and the reason I asked that, good portion of the Ivy Podcast listeners are executives, but on the other side of the spectrum are early stage career professionals. And some of the questions a lot of times that we get from that audience is, especially in technology, when it comes to very unique skills, whether the soft skills or even, technical skills, from your perspective, where do you see a lot of growth? Where do you see a lot of scarcity? If you were in that space, what would you be investing in?
Yeah, and I'm not quite sure I understand the question. So a lot of in what space, as far as like the entry level in the industry?
Just overall, anyone who is even coming into technology, or even maybe I am transitioning from the business side to the technology, or even maybe I am a cybersecurity engineer who has been focused on this space, and I'm looking to expand my skills based on the different trends that are happening out there. Just curious from the overall growth perspective.
So, and your question was, how would I approach it, or what advice would I give to somebody in that?
In a sense, more around from the trends you're seeing in terms of what are the types of skills that are very hard to find these days, especially in the current market. Which ones would you recommend to invest in further, whether that's a soft skill or a technical skill? Just from that perspective, would love to get your thoughts.
So, I'm going to answer that, from the human perspective, right? And so realistically, people want to work with people that are driven, and that are good people, that have good values, and that are hungry to grow. They're enthusiastic, they're hungry, they're problem solvers. So to me, if I have 2 people in front of me, and one of them is solutions minded, and the other one is like the best technologist, but they're problem minded, and they're going to potentially infect my team with negativity, I will go 100% of the time with the solutions-minded person that may be a little bit weaker on the tech skills, but that can get up to speed, because the team element and that cohesion is so important, right? And so the other one will literally drain the energy from the team. And so, from a futuristic perspective, there's, technology constantly evolving. There's emerging technologies coming out. There's things that are getting more ingrained, but ultimately, I think what matters is, what are you interested in? Because if you go in a route that interests you, that gets you fired up, you're going to be successful at whatever you're doing. But but you need to, work on your well-roundedness, work on your self-awareness, polish your skills, your soft skills and your tech skills, right? Because as more and more time goes on, people are becoming more and more aware that, it's about the team. In the past, it used to be that, the CEO was just like, go tell your tech people to just go push some buttons and make something happen. That's not the way it is anymore. The CIO is the right-hand man of the CEO, and technology is driving a lot of the revenue, if not the majority of the revenue. And so the technologists need to be more in tune with what the business needs. And so that's one of the reasons that we're bringing to market what we're bringing, is because these technological teams need to be aligned with the business strategy. If they're not aligned with the business strategy and not highly aligned with the business strategy, you're going to be spinning your wheels and wasting a lot of time and money and energy where it's unnecessary. And it's going to be a lot harder to reach peak performance. But if you can get that team rowing in the same direction and be aligned with that business strategy, and that team culture is fine-tuned, and you're treating that team like a valuable, animal, then you're going to be more successful. But, I think that from my perspective, if I was going to do it all over again, I would be looking at the data science, the AI space. Blockchain space is definitely becoming more and more popular, and it, I believe that it's going to be the backbone of all of automation, right? But there's a lot of great technologies out there that are going to make a huge impact. And I think that, studies are showing that somebody in college right now is going to change potentially career tracks like 5 times. And so being an expert at change and at learning and adapting and kind of aligning of what your interests are, I think is going to be of huge importance.
The last segment of every episode on every podcast is kind of heat check, rapid fire questions. So just brace yourselves. So Bethany, what's the best career advice that you have ever received?
Oh gosh, best career advice that I've ever received. Can I have a pass?
Maybe Javier, you got one?
I would say the best career advice that I've ever received but it would come from a book, right? It's like, I typically read like a book a week, but it's really, it's knowing yourself, right? It's improving yourself and looking at yourself and taking full responsibility for your life and for your every situation that you're encountered with, is, looking at yourself and saying, how can I grow from this? How can I turn this into an opportunity? Has grown me leaps and bounds in all areas of life.
I'll add to that real quick. One of my favorite career advice that I've received is in the form of a question. What would your replacement do? In the sense that for you not to get complacent in particular role or responsibility, if you were replaced today, what do you think your replacement would do differently? What would they do better?
Mm-hmm.
How would they approach things in terms of what maybe you're not doing? So just a different mindset. And I just love asking that question myself periodically.
That's
if I was
one.
to step away, what would my replacement do? So, seems simple, but kind of powerful. Javier, you mentioned books. Bethany, I'll shift to you. What's the book that you always recommend to others, and why is that?
Most recent recommendation is You Are a Badass. It's a awesome book that really helps you put into action. I have multiples, but that one recently has resonated with me, and every person I've recommended it to has really loved it also. So that's my most recent recommendation. They change periodically as I continue to listen to / read more.
Awesome. Javier, share yours.
I would defer to what's important to the person, but a good, well-rounded one that can help you to make some drastic improvements in your life is The Miracle Morning.
Those are great recommendations. We'll make those titles available in show notes. Javier, from a perspective of the just overall, from a standpoint of anyone, whether operating in your particular space or looking to launch their own company, what recommendations would you have for any entrepreneur out there just going through, perhaps difficult times, whether that's from business development or from sales perspective, what are some of the basic principles that always help you, that you go back to when either launching your own company or growing your space? Just talk to us from that perspective.
My approach is that, I'm not in it for the money. I'm in it because it's an extension of myself. It's a way that I live out my purpose. It's a way that I live out my passion. And so if I'm passionate about what I'm doing and I'm literally trying to solve a major problem that's in the world, then every day is fun for me. I get up and I'm excited to come to work, and I'm solving problems, and I'm getting to create things and solve things for people to make their life at work, at home better. And so that it's exciting, and it's not a job when you're doing that. Then it just becomes fun. And so, but the biggest thing for me has been mindset, right? We all tend to beat ourselves up over mistakes or over failures or whatever, but realistically, failure, the more that we can fail, the more the mistakes that we can make, the more we learn from those actual circumstances. And so, it's just to push through that fear and to find the opportunity in any situation, no matter how difficult it is, and to keep that positive mindset, believing in yourself, and just keeping it positive and just riding that wave of positivity has been a huge help for me.
I love that. Definitely. Thanks for sharing that. And guys, I can't thank you enough for your time today. Very short and insightful conversation. I personally learned quite a bit. As with every episode guest, what I love doing is a follow-up recording in about a year, where we revisit the conversation from a year ago, take a listen to everything we've discussed, and see if everything still applies. So I'm definitely looking forward to doing that with you, and I appreciate you guys' time today.
Yeah, likewise. Appreciate
Thanks,
the
John.
opportunity, John. Great talking with you.